Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hey, thanks so much for joining, everyone. Welcome to the 8th webinar in the transition series titled Reimagining Technology Strategies. Really excited for the session today, so thanks everyone for joining. Just want to do a quick call out. There's a couple of handouts in the panel as well, and there's a chat option. If you have questions as we go, you're able to write in some questions. So wanted to jump right in and go ahead and introduce our panel today. So I'll start with myself. My name is Drew Cortez. I'm the Senior Manager of Analytics for the Workers' Comp team at United Airlines. Excited to be part of this panel. I was one of the original transitions panel members back in November at the NWC DC conference. So I'm really excited to kind of bring this discussion about technology and what that means for the future of the industry and kind of how we can help you create a plan for technology at your company. So I've been in workers' compensation now for about 3.5 or 4 years, so still relatively new and learning every day, but excited again to learn from the panelists today. So Jason, can you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Drew. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Cooper. I'm Paradigm's Chief Data and Analytics Officer. I've been in data analytics and technology for well over 30 years. 20 of that's been in healthcare, primarily pharmaceutical, PBM, and group health. I've been in workers' compensation for a whopping 9 weeks, so I'm the least tenured individual as it relates to the workers' compensation industry on the panel. Drew, you'd ask us to kind of cover what's been our biggest influence, if you will, on our career to date. And, I would have to say one of the biggest influencers is my mother. She was a nurse for over 30 years. So, come to learn healthcare through osmosis and really, really care about, the individuals that we get the privilege of serving and, many others that have sort of paid it forward. If there's one really important life lesson that I, have learned throughout my years, it's regardless of whether it's data analytics, tech, or a business problem, always have a backup plan.
That's great. Thanks, Jason. David, why don't we go to you next?
Great. Well, hi, everybody. As some of you know, I'm a formerly practicing physician who joined the software industry in the 80s. I've been dealing with workers' comp in one format or another for about 30 years, so that will help Jason average up a little bit. Most recently in workers' comp, I was National Medical Director for Liberty Mutual for about 13 years. After leaving Liberty, I've been running my own consulting business and have worked with various folks, mostly in the work comp space, but more recently in commercial health, payers, networks, vendors, and continue to be pretty active in the industry. I would say the most influential in my overall approach to healthcare has been Don Berwick, who was one of the mentors in my fellowship program in general medicine. And some of you may know Berwick was appointed by President Obama as the chief of CMS and was the original proponent of the triple aim for value-based healthcare. And I don't know of anyone who's been more influential in the direction of healthcare probably over the last 20 years.
That's great. Thanks so much, David. Howard, can we go to you next?
Sure. And I have to say, I'm a little bit of a rookie, just like Andrew in workers' comp. I've only been in workers' comp for about 3.5 years. I was brought in to be the CEO of what used to be called Viad, is now Perspecta. But I have about 30 years of experience in technology, healthcare technology, and employers and TPAs. And one of the exciting things I view in my role here is to bring about, positive change in the workers' comp industry by deploying, sort of newer technologies into the field where, I think the industry is a little bit of laggard relative to insurance in general and relative to healthcare in general. So I'm enjoying very much having a positive impact on the industry. So it's really been a lot of fun.
Excellent. Thanks, Howard. And Deborah.
Yes. So I have been in this industry for 20 years, workers' compensation. But like many, I had started my career in group health. So I worked in group health first at major insurance companies, TPAs, Humana Healthcare at one point in time, even working on a Medicare pilot. Ironically, I came to workers' comp because when I was working at CNA Group Benefits in a role that was both clinical and an adjuster as a pilot program, that division was purchased by the Hartford Insurance Company. And then that was my foray into workers' comp. I worked home office claims, and like I've already heard mentioned on this panel, I found myself coming from a different, healthcare background into workers' comp. And at that time, Hartford was the only company using a prescription drug formulary for which I had already been working with for many years in group health. So to the point that's already been made, I found that there are real opportunities here. And while I've learned through working in the industry that yes, we're much slower to adopt in this market, there's also a lot of opportunity. And there's certainly a lot of opportunity that's been untapped that I think the conversation today, when we're leading with technology strategies, creates even more opportunity for workers' comp in the future to make a contribution to the world. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm the founder and Chief Executive Officer of CareBridge International. We are a technology data analytics company, and while I am a clinical person, I've been working with technology for at least 30 years and done a lot of pilots and things like that. So I'm just very thrilled to be here, and I'm very excited about this important conversation.
Thanks, Deborah. We're glad to have you, that's for sure. So thanks, everyone. I think, as you heard, it's a great panel. Some different perspectives, different time in the industry. So I think this is going to be a great discussion. So really quickly, before we get started, I want to just talk about the transitions for a second. And this is the group that is sponsoring these webinars and helping. Oops, I went ahead in my slides. This is the group that's sponsoring these webinars and helping us put everything together. So we're really excited to be part of the transitions, and really at its core, the transitions is a movement to help the workers' compensation industry collectively and individually think strategically about how to handle the influx and outflux of talent over the coming decades. So you've been able to join some of the other webinars. You've heard a lot about some different things like mentorship, business processes, management, several different topics that we think are critical, where it's really important to be able to create a plan for each stakeholder in workers' comp, whether you're at an employer like myself, a TPA, managed care company, whatever it might be, whatever your place is in the industry, there's definitely an outflux of excellent talent and expertise that's been in the industry for quite a while, and there's got to be a plan. One, to make sure we're retaining that knowledge, but then two, to actually attract and retain the next generation of talent in workers' comp as well. And we really believe, the reason for this panel today is we really believe that technology plays a critical role in that, and that, if we want to keep advancing the industry and improving outcomes for everyone in the industry, most importantly, the injured workers, of course, then technology's got a part to play. And, we really think there's an opportunity here. So just a couple resources here to help you get involved if you're able to. We've got more webinars coming up, which is on the next slide, but there's also some handouts, like I mentioned, that you're able to download that's got some great takeaways from each of the panelists. We also started a mentoring program that you're able to sign up for, and you can find some of those resources on the LinkedIn page or on the Transitions website. So some great resources. We're excited about the mentoring program because it's an industry-wide initiative with an executive council through the Transitions that's helping match people together and really making sure these are valuable relationships that can help people advance their careers and really help improve the industry as a whole. I mentioned a few more webinars, so we've got more coming up as soon as June 28th, Reimagining Marketing Methods, and then Human Resources, Branding, and then kind of the wrap-up webinar, which is creating a plan. That's really the end goal here, is to make sure that we're giving you some resources that you can take back to your company, your individual career, and really have a plan for yourself, but also your company, the industry as a whole. What can you do in this week, next week, the next 6 months, the next year, to be able to meet those goals? So that's really the idea here, is to kind of get people thinking, get the conversation started, and then figure out how we can actually act on it. So I'm going to jump out of the panel here and go back to our group. So hey, we wanted to jump into the meat of the conversation next, so I think we're going to get right into it, and really excited about this. So the first thing I wanted to ask everyone, and I'll go first actually, is this is a common question, I think, is kind of what attracted you to the workers' compensation industry? And for myself, I think, and a lot of others maybe on the line, it kind of happened by accident for me. I didn't know what I was getting into. My current boss had reached out to me and asked me to apply for a role, and seemed like a great opportunity, and I've been able to learn something new every day. It's really challenged me and been exciting. So for me, it was by accident, but I think some of our panelists, it may have been more deliberate. So I'd like to get your feedback there. So Howard, I know you mentioned it briefly, but why don't we start with you there? I think you're on mute, Howard.
Okay, thank you. I was attracted to it because of the opportunity. I mean, I think workers' comp has been underinvested in technology for many years. And because of that, you see, really largely mainframe technology stacks. You see a lot of older systems that are not in the forefront. And I think that as an opportunity area, particularly in analytics, particularly in facilitating change and sustainable competitive advantages, it seemed like an industry that's really, really ripe for fundamental change, both in the technology and the business processes that surround the technology. So, it's funny because a lot of people avoid it, workers' comp, for that reason. I viewed it was an attraction because it's so fundamentally in need of change. And I thought of processed it as the way banking was 20 years ago, where there was an underinvestment in very, very old systems and very non-supportive systems. And also, I think there's such an opportunity to have a positive social change about getting people back to work quickly, and saving employers money by doing analytics, and really sort of transforming the traditional, claims processes and chains of transactions. So.
Thanks, Howard. Yeah, we're excited to hear about an opportunity. Deborah, what about you? I know you mentioned you've got a little bit of a clinical background, but also the technology background, and maybe part of an acquisition as well. But what has kind of kept you in workers' comp over all these years, and what keeps you going every day?
Yeah, I think what I loved about workers' comp once I got into it was the fact that I had worked in a clinical capacity as a case manager on very, complex claims, working with individuals and health insurance that had chronic health problems. And in that environment, you're working with people that really what you're trying to do is encourage them with trying to change behavior and habits to improve their health status. Whereas in workers' comp, I think what I really love about it is when I came into workers' comp, I was actually a catastrophic case manager. So the claims that I was responsible for were the really severe injuries, these multi-million-dollar cases. And I had the highest return to work rates in the company. And that was because I brought a lot of the principles that worked from the group health space. And I was able to make such a significant impact on really trying to legitimately help people in crisis who were living through, really challenging situations and getting them back to their normal life as much as possible. And a lot of that means getting back to work. Being back to work gives you so much a sense of well-being. And so it was very rewarding for me. I enjoyed it so much that I've remained in the industry, but now have taken those skills and created a technology platform that can enable, claim environments like we're going to talk today to also improve outcomes and performance, because as we've mentioned, there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think that's a good reminder for all of us too. The discussion is technology, but ultimately we need to be focused on the injured workers, right? And helping them return to work and to health as well. So great reminder for all of us. David, how about you? What kind of brought you into workers' comp? Obviously, you've got an extensive background, but what brought you there in the first place, and kind of what's kept you involved? Got you on mute, David.
Sorry. I won't be long-winded about this. The short answer is I needed a job, and the medical director position at Liberty Mutual was open, and I'd known some people there. I had built algorithms for utilization review as part of my software work, and was familiar with work comp already a little bit because we had some work comp clients in addition to commercial health clients, and we had also built some disability algorithms, so I understood the group and work comp disability field a little bit, maybe more so than a lot of commercial health folks. But really, it was just sort of there was an interesting vacancy to be a national medical director, and there was an opportunity to shape some things that, frankly, don't currently exist in the industry, I don't think, anymore. So that was, and I would echo Howard's comments that there are certainly a lot of opportunities to do things, but as we'll probably get into, there are also a lot of challenges in actually implementing and making a difference on some of those opportunities.
That's great. Yeah, I can identify with that, David. Jason, last but not least, you're the newest to workers' comp in the industry, but what's brought you here?
I'll call you as soon as it over.
Yes. Yeah, sure, Drew. So, I mean, first and foremost, I would say the privilege of serving injured workers and their families. I've been in group health for a long time, and group health, of course, is pooled risk and population health, and it's just delivered differently, that's all. And so, the desire to help individuals with unique circumstances and extend beyond just the member, patient, injured worker into the family and be more holistic, including the community, really attracted me to workers' compensation. The other piece I would say that attracted me to workers' comp, Drew, was Paradigm itself. Paradigm's an industry-leading organization. They have a lot of technological capabilities and are very innovation-focused. And the Chief Data and Analytics Officer role is a new role for Paradigm. And so I'm just really excited to join this organization and be leading the charge in some specialized areas in workers' comp.
That's great. Thanks, Jason. And we're glad to have you in the industry as well with all your expertise. So we've touched on it a little bit already, but I wanted to quickly do a little bit of benchmarking. And I know, Howard, you mentioned banking. Maybe Jason, will stay with you because you are the newest to workers' comp right out of, group health and some other industries. So, what do you think in the technology space, from what you've seen over the past few weeks, at least, that workers' comp has done well? Where are we behind what you've seen in group health and some other industries? Just to do a quick benchmarking. You there, Jason?
I am. Sorry about that, Drew.
Okay.
Apologies. So benchmarking against other industries, right? If I think about it, and of course, we're not meaning benchmarking as in literal benchmarking, right? Because group health benchmarks, and by that I mean like aggregate benchmarks and book of business benchmarks, wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to us. So that's one unique piece, actually. In healthcare, a lot of group health organizations that are broad and wide and sometimes narrow, regional, but they have a lot of benchmarking capabilities. And from a literal perspective, I think it's difficult for us to have those same assets. There are some unique assets in the industry, but not nearly to the breadth and depth that are available to the group health space. Now, if we're meaning and discussing really benchmarking workers' comp as it relates to technological advancement and technological innovation, I would say, as I've reviewed the workers' comp industry and been exposed to so much, and I'm just sort of, sponging everything over the last 9 weeks, I would say it's my rough thumb in the wind that workers' compensation as an entire market feels approximately a decade behind group health. And I think that that's not an insurmountable chasm to cross and quickly catch up from an innovation perspective, from technological deployment to processes that we utilize, and so many other things that could be done to really move us forward in workers' compensation. But that's my rough benchmark, is that, I would say approximately from a sophistication and robotic process automation and, several other, capabilities that we're a bit behind.
Yeah, and that's where we come in. Deborah, what would you say you've got a little bit of a clinical background and some things like this, where, what are there some things we've done well? I know, you run an analytics and data company, but, what have we done well? Where are we still maybe a little behind some other industries out there?
No, I think it's very interesting. I have to say, Jason's comments about being 10 years behind, because that is exactly what I thought when I came into this industry 20 years ago, that we were about 10 years behind. So that was my assessment as well. But in terms of, what we do well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, one, when you look at one of the things that I found very interesting, particularly around the opioid crisis, is the state of Washington as a state. They have been an excellent data collector for health data around Medicare, Medicaid, their group population health, everything for many, many years. They've tended to been ahead of other states. And what was interesting is when the opioid crisis was really starting to come to a head, or it was starting to become recognized, it was actually the workers' comp space, particularly around the state of Washington data, that identified like, hey, there's a problem here. And I think that we don't give ourselves enough credit for the awareness, some of the awareness that we've had early on around the opioid crisis. But I think that that also signals the opportunity, because the story is we have in all these legacy systems, and even there are some smaller regional companies that have no systems at all. It's kind of all over the place. We still have companies in mainframe systems, is that there are bits of valuable data in this marketplace that are untapped. And if only we can accelerate the adoption of technology and our capability to capture all this valuable data, we will learn so much more, and we will be able to accelerate how we improve results, outcomes, customer experience. Just every aspect of the process can be improved upon if we can capture these data points. Because the opioid crisis is just one example of how one state having some information. Imagine if we all had that information and we were measuring it, how much more valuable that could have been in addressing the crisis. So it was an awakening about the value of our industry, but also the opportunity that's here.
That's great. And I
Deborah,
love to talk about the,
Deborah, oh,
go ahead, Jason. Yeah.
sorry, Drew. I was just going to say, I couldn't agree with Deborah more. There's such untapped potential, right? If you just think about everything from looking at the data that you have, not only within your four walls, but also publicly available data, social determinants of health, and so many other things, there's untapped potential for portfolio diversification, product development, and also discovering and unearthing unmet needs within the populations that we have the privilege to serve. So Deborah is spot on.
We like to hear that. Howard, I think you might be on mute.
Yeah, I was going to add one other thing. You know, there's been more of a focus when there's a claim to get to an adjuster and mechanically assigning or transactionally assigning it to a provider. And historically, there hasn't been a look at who's the best provider, who's the quickest provider, who's going to be the most cost-effective and effective provider. And we're just now starting to see some of the earlier stage companies that are, you know, facilitating those quicker, faster, better. And the employee satisfaction with that has got to be so much higher because their expectation when they're scheduling their own appointment is they're going online to an Epic or a Cerner and doing their scheduling for the provider they select instantly. And so the expectation of the injured worker has got to be changing faster than the systems, because people are used to immediate gratification from the Amazons and from the other systems they deal with. They can't relate to it's taking 2 weeks or 3 weeks to schedule an appointment for physical therapy or something like that. It just seems unbelievably slow.
I would cynically observe, though, that because of the lack of good information on quality on the internet, what we've created is an ability for patients to schedule an appointment with a provider in a hurry that they actually know nothing about in terms of quality. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges in terms of data. Now, to be fair, commercial health has not solved this problem either. There is much information available from CMS. You can get stars ratings on primary care physicians, but the whole quality component in terms of the access that consumers have to quality information is quite limited. So I don't want to naysay about the opportunities to create better tools for patients. We need better tools for patients, but I don't also want to pretend that when we create these scheduling things for patients, we still need to give them a lot more information than right now is available.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, David. And so I want to jump to the next topic, and maybe David, I'll keep it with you. I think you touched on it earlier. You know, what are some of the obstacles that are out there? I want to make sure, you know, before we talk about solutions, you know, what are some of the issues that are preventing, you know, as a whole in the industry, some of this new technology?
Well, gosh, let me count the ways. I mean, when I started at Liberty Mutual, I was told that it was the place where old mainframe programmers went to die. And as a segue into the technology issues, I mean, frankly, that's not a bad call out for Liberty Mutual. I think all of the major work comp insurers have these enormous mainframe-based legacy systems, and that has been an obstacle to innovation. And this is me, the doctor, telling the IT people their job. But I think there are various disconnects in the industry. I mean, one problem is that in workers' comp, the customer is an employer. It's not the individual patient. Whereas in commercial health, even though employers are facilitating the purchase of healthcare, patients still have a choice. They can choose different insurers, they can choose different plans, and the plans over the last 20 years, I would say, have become increasingly consumer-centric. They've had to be. Most Blues plans, most non-Blues plans have really focused on, how can we really delight our patients, and they focused on preventive care and on wellness as well as acute care. You don't really see as much of that in workers' comp as is necessary. We are still very much focused on rates. We're still very much focused on budgets, on giving employers the lowest premiums and things like that. So I think that I would call that out as one of the big disconnects to innovation. And then also the other thing, and I'll let other people talk, so I won't go down my whole list, but one thing that I think struck me coming from a commercial health background into comp is the in commercial health, clinicians have a lot of familiarity with IT. You actually have clinical information officers for a lot of health systems and health plans right now. You don't see anything like that in comp. There is not a good there's not a good marriage of the folks who need to worry about patient care and patient quality with the IT side of the house. It's very much more divorced in comp than you see in commercial health, and I think that's also a big problem. All right, I should let others talk, so I'm going to stop there.
No, that's okay. I think some great points, David. Howard, what have you seen in your experience as far as obstacles? I know you're providing some software to the industry, so what have you seen in some of your conversations?
Well, it's interesting because on the group health side, there's really been a movement towards price visibility, and CMS has come out with the No Surprises Act, and consumers are really starting to see what their out-of-pocket costs are, and they're starting to see some quality indicators. Yes, I agree with David. They're not perfect, and there's a wide variety of quality indicators that some of them make no sense, especially the consumer rankings of providers. But we're starting to see that there is more price transparency information available to adjusters and employers in workers' comp, and they're starting to, and some quality indices as well. We're starting to see sort of aggregate rankings of the lower cost providers or the more effective providers in workers' comp, and some of the new analytics tools are starting to show that. And I think the adoption hasn't occurred yet, but the interest has been sparked. And I think the interest will stimulate the adoption over the next near term, the next few months, and definitely next few years. And it really is about visibility to cost expectancy, and quality.
Yeah, I think, and I would add, Howard, I think it's obviously important that, injured workers have visibility and ease of access and things like that. I think as an employer, that's important to us as well, is we're really craving transparency for the decisions that are made for costing, and obviously for the data as well. I think that's critical as well for everyone in the industry, and can be, sort of a competitive advantage out there. Deb, I wanted to ask you about this one too, and then we'll move on to the next topic. But what do you see as some of the barriers to some of this innovation that are out there? And your company has been working through it, but what have you seen as some of the issues?
Well, I'd like to echo what David said. He did mention early at the beginning of the presentation about the triple aim, which is access, quality, and cost. And where we are today, that I think that answer is a couple of things. Externally, in terms of the customer, Under the Affordable Care Act is this concept of the triple aim, pricing transparency, these things that we've been talking about, and patient-centered care, patient-centered care. We are only starting to have that conversation in workers' compensation. And it matters because, to David's point about our perspective that our customer is the employer and we're more focused on rates and premium, today's consumer is expecting an Amazon experience. Why does it take 30 days to make a claim decision or 60 days to make a claim decision? Why does it take so long for a patient to get a referral in workers' comp or to start to receive the care that they need? Because we're waiting and making decisions and it's running through different people and a lot of the noise and the friction that's in the process that's delaying care. And it is, that delay of care more than ever because people are used to immediate results. Consumers want an immediate action. You wait 3 days, 30 days to make a decision. It's no wonder they're running to get an attorney representation. So all these things are us getting in our own way as an industry, and it can be solved. And these things can be solved using technology to remove the friction that not only improves our claim processes and our efficiencies, but the ultimate goal, which is to create a better experience for the injured worker, a better experience and a better outcome for the injured worker. That is where we are as consumers. Consumers expect it, they demand it, they're getting it from other places. And today we're seeing technology-driven, insurance companies that can do these things, that can make an immediate decision. And this is where, the rubber meets the road. Because if we can't, as a large brick and mortar company, provide this experience, the consumers can now go somewhere else. So we have this opportunity now to seize these capabilities that are available to really improve the patient-centered, the customer experience.
That's great, Deborah. And I think, we recognize that technology's got to play a role in this, that, I think you're diving into some deeper issues in the industry, and a lot of them, technology needs to be part of the solution, right? So I think that's great. Jason, I want to jump back to you, and I've got a little bit of a loaded, multi-part question, but I know you're new to the industry, but obviously there's been a change this past year. We've all started adopting different tools with technology that we use. There's a shift in the workforce to remote work now as well. Do you think this has really changed the willingness to innovate and look at different tools? Or do you think it's more of the status quo, but wanted to get your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. And I think it has changed, and I think actually the general overarching, work ecosystem in the U.S. has probably changed forever. So let me say, first of all, now, right, we as an industry are used to sort of work from anywhere or work from wherever. It really doesn't matter. And I think, say, one of the biggest impacts, Drew, if you look at the group health space, because of course I can't speak about workers' comp, but pre-pandemic, telehealth utilization as an example of a modality of delivery of care was only used 3 to 4% of the time in aggregate. At the height of the pandemic, it was in the, upper teens to lower 20% at time, right? And what we were seeing was a significant source of utilization in behavioral health, and I'll come back to that. Post-pandemic, telehealth utilization went down to lower double digits, but still that is 3 to 4 times the volume of utilization than we saw pre-pandemic. And I think telehealth is here to stay, and telehealth can have some really positive impacts on the workers' compensation industry. So, I think telehealth impacts and different digital deliveries for care delivery and, the AAA impacts that Deborah spoke about. I think that leveraging, digital advances and telehealth are going to be really important. I think if you don't have a digital strategy, or if you're not thinking digitally forward, especially as it comes to, the injured worker and their families' experience with us, as well as the, clients that we serve that do expect those, iOS app experiences, or I think Deborah said the Amazon experience. We have to be very cognizant of that they, they can use their, phones for everything from, retail banking to, getting tickets to a outdoor concert. And so we should enable that ease of use and convenience to modify the experience. The other thing I would say, though, is that this remoteness of work during the pandemic really spurred, in my opinion, an interest towards automation. And, there can be some fear as it relates to automation. I mean workforce fear, right? Oh, automation. Now I'm going to be, out of a job, if you will. And I actually don't think of it that way. I think we should not be afraid of the machines, so to speak, because what automation allows, and there needs to be a whole bunch of it, by the way. I could go a lot of places, but automation equals resource availability, right? And we mentioned resources and mind space as some of the challenges that we have. And, sometimes your staff doesn't have a long enough snorkel to pull their head above the waterline to really innovate. And I think automation allows that availability of resource to then focus on digital innovation. And so I don't think it's something to be afraid of. I think it's something to be embraced that could help every organization.
Yeah, Jason, completely agree. I think, the most successful employers, providers, anyone in the space, they're finding ways to blend technology with that expertise, right? Which fits into the transitions pretty well. You need both, right? You need the industry experience and knowledge, but you also need some technology solutions to help move things along. Deborah,
that's right.
some thoughts.
No, sorry, Drew, but that's right. And on the clinical side, by the way, the piece that the pandemic really brought forward and just reemphasized, we've already known this for years and years, but it reemphasized the necessity and the importance of holistic, whole person care, and especially the need for behavioral health. 80% of the behavioral health, telehealth utilization, or 80% of telehealth utilization was in behavioral health. And, when necessary, we need to deploy those resources to help individuals, meet their goals.
Thanks, Jason. Deborah, I know you've got some similar thoughts on the fear of technology, and so what comes to mind for you, and where do you think the opportunity lies there? How do we overcome that fear?
Yeah, I've been in this business for 5 years, CareBridge International. Well, actually, we opened our doors in 2015. So we've been around a little while, and actually since the beginning of all the InsurTech conferences that some may be familiar with, like InsurTech Connect or Digital Insurance. And it's been a really interesting evolution to kind of watch the growth in our understanding of how these technologies can be used in the insurance space. But the fear is twofold. There's the fear because it's unknown. And I see this a lot, and especially when I go to InsurTech conferences and there are actually claims people that attend, they're completely overwhelmed. All the technical terms that get tossed around, AI, all of the, analytic terms and things like this are foreign to the environment that we've historically been familiar with. And so it's very overwhelming. And so we have to remember that it's new. And when you're talking about new and you're talking about innovation, it has to be socialized. And you have to share examples, and you have to give real examples or show real examples of how these innovations can be useful. After that, when people start to say, oh, now I understand what that means, and you've eliminated some of that fear of, I don't understand these technical terms, this is not my world, then you get into the fear of the robot taking my job. And I've heard that too, many times. The desk level individuals are afraid. They say, well, if you're automating any part of my claims process, then some of us are going to get laid off. And I would argue, and I think Jason has already said this, no, you can reallocate those resources to work that matters instead of just putting out fires, filling your calendar with one deposition and answering responses to legal drafts and letters and deadlines for getting checks out and so on. All these busy tasks, and you're not even familiar with your claim. You don't even know from claim to claim what the compensable injury is. Get rid of it. Get rid of the noise, and that's what these technologies can do. Eliminate the noise, streamline the work, streamline the things that don't require a human being to put that kind of time into it so that you can be better acquainted with your claim and make an impact. Provide that human contact, provide more resources around the opioid addiction or the mental health challenges or many other things that your time can be well spent if you can eliminate a lot of the busy work from your desk. And that's where I see this future opportunity. And if we can get past that fear by educating yourself, going to these conferences, reading, familiarizing yourself with some of these technical terms and what they actually mean, and talking to people, and then realize that this isn't eliminating jobs, it's making your job easier. I think that's how we need to be thinking about it to help get past some of the fear.
I really like that point, Deborah, and I think you're right. People still crave that human connection. I think it's, in my opinion, kind of a misnomer that everyone, it's great to have those neat tools, but I think people still want to talk to a human sometimes, and they want to get answers from someone. So it's important to recognize that as well, that this technology, while it's great to have these cool user interfaces and things like that, it's really, at its core, it can help us free up the industry experts to make great decisions quicker and really build those connections and help people, establish a relationship. So I think that's great. We want to.
I think the premise there, though, Deb, is that this will allow adjusters to work smarter and deliver better quality care to the injured workers, which I completely endorse. But I think that there is going to have to be more of a push than we have heretofore seen from the employer community to endorse that. Because right now, too many employers are looking for rate, and there isn't enough of a focus, in my view, on the overall outcomes of claims. And if employers can really get behind that, and TPAs, insurers can show that their adjusters are working smarter and working more effectively because of these technological tools, that's a win. But right now, I'm not seeing as much of that from the employer community as I think we need to see.
I agree with that. I think that the movement towards telehealth will provide some cost opportunity. And I think even though there's an excuse that every state regulation is different, I think you'll see more concierge services offered to the injured workers to give them at least the impression, if not the reality, that somebody cares about their total person, from behavioral to the physical injury to the continuums of care that could be made available to them. So I think the switch to telehealth will provide that opportunity area where we can all do these things at the same or lower cost.
Well, let me challenge you on that a little bit, Howard. Why should I, as a physician, be paid less for an hour of telehealth than an hour of in-person?
Yeah, you know, and there are some efficiencies in telehealth also, because the physician's not going to the office, and a lot of the claims paperwork is not, you know, sort of held up. Those are contracted in advance. But there really is, you know, there really is some pressure that they shouldn't get paid less. But there are some inherent cost efficiencies there as well.
No, and I mean, I think there's transportation savings and things like that, but practicing physicians are still going to need to maintain a bricks and mortar office. You can't abandon the office just because you have a telehealth presence. So I want to just have people be mindful of that, and this is true for physical therapists too, by the way. I think there has often been an impression like, oh, well, we can save money on physical therapy because we have telehealth. Well, why should the therapists get paid less? I mean, they're still doing the work.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, and David, I would pile on and then hand the mic back to Drew, since we're about out of time and we want to have some time for Q&A. But we also need to think about this in the realm of not fee for service, because that model is dying and we need to get rid of it. And workers' comp has to continue to embrace value-based solutions, right? No outcome, no income. And the thing that's really hanging as a big question mark is, does telehealth deliver the same value-based results as in-person care? And I would say we don't know yet.
Right. Right.
We absolutely don't know.
You can't.
That's right.
Physical therapy manipulations over the phone.
So this is absolutely a great discussion. Jason's right. We're running up on the hour here, and I don't see any questions yet. So if anyone in the audience has a question, feel free to put it into the chat function. But while we're waiting on that, I do. What's that, Deb?
I just had a quick question for David. His comment about if you don't mind, the employers, that they need to put pressure on the insurance carriers for better outcomes. David, do you think that the consumers, by putting pressure on the employers, will put that pressure on the insurance companies?
Up to a point, but I think because the employer is the customer for the TPAs and for the payers, there's a disconnect between the injured workers and the people who are actually doing the work to take care of them. I think it makes it one step removed, and it makes that pressure a little bit less direct. I mean, in general, I'd agree, but I think there has to be some push from employers. It can't just be the injured worker community, because frankly, most people don't get injured. They don't expect to get injured. And people, when you start a new job, are you really thinking about who your work comp carrier is? No. I mean, most people don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But an employer like United Airlines, they can compare their group health outcomes against their workers' comp outcomes. And so that would be, a question for you, Drew, is if your organization is kind of looking at those things, how does that influence your expectations from your work comp provider?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think there is starting to be a shift. I don't think we're the whole way there yet, but you hear a lot about the advocacy-based model and things like that from employers and from TPAs. And I think, those are just words right now, but I mean, we are trying to put it into action, right? Because I mean, I come from a finance background. So, at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're keeping workers engaged and they get back to health, but we also recognize that better outcomes means lower costs for us. I mean, that's as simple as it is. We can see that in our data, and we recognize that. And I think people are starting to come around to that it doesn't need to be confrontational, right? It's actually, quicker, a better experience for everyone involved, and lower cost if it's not confrontational, and you get people the care they need as quickly as possible. And then, they're going to be more willing to come back to work as well. So I do think, we're in the early stages of that. It's probably different at every employer, but I think we are starting to see a little bit of a shift there. And so we've got, I think, 4 minutes left here, and I still don't see any questions. So I just maybe a quick wrap up, 30 seconds to a minute from each of our panelists, kind of what is one quick thing that you think the audience can take away when it comes to their business, to their technology? What should they be thinking about, leaving this webinar? So Howard, maybe I'll start with you.
I think that the analytic tools are starting to have positive impacts. We're starting to see ROI analysis. We're starting to see actionable insights on the best referrals. We're starting to see provider rankings and scoring, and we're starting to see price transparency. And I think all those things will gain traction over the next few months. And I think what David was talking about, the pressure from employers to force those things, will start to have positive change on the whole industry.
Completely agree. Jason, how about you?
Yeah, my quick comment would be that in my limited exposure, there's far too much data that we have that's born analog. And if you don't understand that, right, born analog basically means manually entered versus born digital, right? We don't have enough, ubiquitous standards. We can, of course, pile on to all of the typical standards, right, HL7 and whatnot, but too much data in workers' comp is born analog. We need a lot more EDI. And then once you have those things solved, the data becomes so much more accessible and less latent.
That's great. Deborah, how about you?
I think my final comment would be, regardless of your role, is that you embrace the process. And I say that because while maybe you're a claim handler and you think, this is all out of my control, I don't make these decisions, the executive people will decide. Well, yes, and what they build, you will use. And so become a part of the process. When you're at the desk level, you know firsthand what those friction points are with the customer, in the customer's journey, in the claim process. You're there, you're in it, and you can provide some valuable information and input into innovation in your company by simply identifying each day, thinking about your work and where the friction points are and where the opportunities were, or things that you don't really require your attention that could be automated. Have those discussions, start those discussions, be a part of the discussion in your organization, and embrace the process and contribute to it. I think that's the most important thing, because this thing isn't just this change, this transformation isn't just top down, it's bottom up. And everybody has to buy in and participate and look for the value and you do that by first identifying the problem. You don't build a solution without knowing exactly what those problems are and the pain points. And everyone can contribute to that. And so that would be my final thoughts.
That's great. Everyone has a role to play. David, we'll go to you for one final takeaway.
I think those are all great comments, and I would endorse all of them. Just in a nutshell, I would say it's important to understand what your big picture is and what your outcomes are. If you're looking at a technology, if you're looking to innovate, if you're trying to implement something, how does it fit into the big picture? And the big picture for me as a clinician is, what are your injured worker outcomes? Are you really going to improve outcomes? Are you going to make the experience of care, the duration of disability, are you going to influence that in some way? And how does that technology do that? And how does it fit in? So I'll leave it there.
That's excellent. Well, hey, we're right at the top of the hour, so I just want to thank all the panelists again. Thanks, Deborah, David, Howard, Jason. I think this is a great discussion. Obviously, we could go on for hours, I think, but really appreciate your time to put together your thoughts and remarks. And just want to remind everyone that there's a couple handouts, a few slides in PDF format in the meeting that you can download, and then also a handout that's got some takeaways. Some of them we've touched on, some maybe we didn't get to here, but I think some excellent takeaways for everyone to kind of stoke the fire a little bit and get everyone thinking about this. So once again, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks to the panelists. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great discussion.
Thanks all.